Is digital collaboration the future of research in Africa? Not really, but it can certainly help. Welcome back. This is Yael, and last week I had the pleasure to attend the Gorwaa Symposium. Andrew Harvey organized this symposium, and he did the same last year, in which I was actively participating, whereas this year I was just attending. And you may remember Andrew Harvey from other videos. I mentioned him before, and you should definitely check out his YouTube channel, where the Gorwaa Symposium will be soon uploaded. Attending the Gorwaa Symposium got me thinking, so I want to share with you some considerations on how academia should be and who are the linguists or scholars in general you should definitely imitate and get inspiration from. But before we dive in, if you take notes on paper, maybe you are a writer or you're just passionate about stationery, then check out my shop, where you will find my photographs on the covers, but also the alphabets of some of the endangered languages the scholars we'll talk about today are working on. So check my shop out. All right, let's talk about online fieldwork, shall we? I have two great examples of scholars you should learn from. That is Andrew Harvey and Yvonne Traes. I've talked about both of them before, and if you haven't checked those videos yet, I'll put them up here. And last week I noticed a couple of things that I would recommend you do just as these scholars are doing. For example, how you give talks. Andrew's talks always stand out for me, and from the very beginning I started taking notes on what I should add to my own talks. Such as, he puts a QR code that directly links to a database or other information he mentions in his talks, so that it's directly accessible, immediately accessible to anybody who is interested in that. So you just need to take a picture in that moment, or even better, he uploads his talks on his YouTube channel, so that if you miss anything or you want to get deeper into something he mentioned, you can always check those out. This means that these are also freely accessible. Then both of these scholars have first-hand experience and dedication to the cause. What do I mean? I mean that they both have been working on the same language for years, getting to know both the language itself and the speakers. So they build a relationship with the local community, meaning that they know the speakers and the language at a deeper level compared to most linguists. So not only they have first-hand, but also long-lasting experience. And one thing that really sets them apart is how they give back to the local community. They build a bridge between continents, because we're talking about Westerners working in Africa for Africans with Africans, researching African languages. This means that in basically every single talk or intervention or paper, they support the local communities. And how they advocate for the local community? Well, even financially, because they are hiring assistants or language consultants or give other opportunities to members of the local communities speaking the languages they are working on. They provide fair wages for the locals' contribution. And I saw that they also treat them like equals, regardless of the position they cover. So they could be PhDs, they could be language consultants, research assistants. It doesn't matter. They are all equals, despite the fact that these researchers are professors, so the locals still have a certain degree of respect. But there's no pity or white savior behavior in their approach. And you can see it in the fact that they teach the locals the same software, platform or technology that we use in Europe, or these scholars use in Western countries, so that they can collect and maybe partially categorize or analyze data independently. Because these scholars go regularly to the local community, so they travel regularly, but they do not live in Africa, meaning that they keep in touch, and for the period that they are conducting fieldwork in person in Africa, they can do so and so, but they can also keep working with their assistants during the remaining months of the year. And that's when online fieldwork comes in handy, because you also need to be open-minded to value research conducted online, because it is possible to keep having a collaboration with locals in Africa thanks to the internet, although there is this kind of stigma still about fieldwork conducted in person versus online. And in these two cases, both scholars already established a strong relationship with the locals before starting doing any online fieldwork or keeping in touch via the internet. So there's still this element of getting to know one another in person first. I'm not taking that away from fieldwork. A little side note. I believe that Africanists are built differently. Of course, I'm just talking about linguists who study African languages because that's my experience, but I suppose this could apply to other scholars as well, because they have a specific type of resilience and dedication that I have not seen in other linguists. I'm talking about Westerners working with Africans in Africa for some periods of time. I'm not talking about African researchers because that's a different story, but I noticed that there are no preconceptions, or if they ever had any preconception, it was at the very beginning of their careers, and it got probably crushed during the very first trip to Africa, because that trip hits you hard, no matter who you are or what you're doing in Africa. But I can assure you that these scholars do not have any preconceptions anymore. If anything, they have a deep understanding of the culture, the people, the customs, and they learned to adapt to certain circumstances. They have to be open-minded and be able to embrace different points of view while sharing their expertise. And this exchange leads to mutual growth. I think this is also why they're open to use unconventional means. For instance, I mentioned the use of the internet for online fieldwork. But what do I mean? Depending on the country, they use different platforms. So, for instance, in Ethiopia, it would be easier to be in contact with the locals using Telegram, because that's the most common platform they use to keep in touch. In Tanzania and Kenya, it's easier to use WhatsApp, whereas Zoom is not the best option because depending on the country, it works better or worse. In East Africa, it's quite common that you would rather choose something else. And so that's how we did it also last year when I attended the course about Gorwaa and field methods, in which we would meet with the language consultant and another assistant who was also accustomed to technology enough to be helping with the technicalities. And we made a couple of attempts until we realized as a class, and so Andrew, guiding the class, realized that the best mean was to have WhatsApp calls. And as usual, if connection is low, then you just stop sharing the video, but at least you can hear one another. And since we were studying the language, the assistant who was helping in Tanzania, was also recording the audio right there and then shared the audio with Andrew, who after that shared it with us students. Meaning that even though during the live session of data collection, there might have been some delays, or maybe we weren't able to catch every single sound, we would always have this backup of a proper recording. And I guess something similar can be done with Telegram. I just don't have any experience with that personally. But this also means that for local communities, it's easier to reach you who are currently in Europe, for instance, just using their phone. And I guarantee you that phones are more common than water. So maybe the internet connection is not as strong, but there is some way to connect with the locals. Last week's symposium about Gorwaa reminded me of all these tools and all possible ways in which we can improve research, fieldwork, academia. And it's inspiring to see in the eyes of these scholars their energy, their dedication, and how much they care about making sure that everyone is treated fairly, and the respect that goes into the relationship with the local communities. These examples are about Westerners researching African languages. The discussion would be different if we were to change the variables, of course. But I mean, you get the point. This is how academia should be, in my opinion, and this is how fieldwork should be conducted. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you haven't checked out Andrew's channel yet, please do so. I will link it below. If you want to hear about Yvonne Traes, you can keep an eye on the CNRS Lacan website. I will link it as well. Do you know any other scholars who inspire you and who are able to innovate but also respect the tradition and the culture while doing their fieldwork? Don't forget to check out my shop. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.